Hey everybody, Riot Mort and Riot Kent back again with the patch 1219 rundown. This is another patch. We're on the second patch of the Uncharted Realms, and yeah, we're moving right along. So, Kent, what were the goals of this patch?
Okay, first I want to say this background is very cute. That outfit on the Pengu. So this patch is our last major rework patch. We had some big projects for this patch, but after this one, we're going to be focused mostly on maintenance, small tunings, and kind of keeping the meta more similar rather than like introducing new mechanics or changing mechanics that you're already very familiar with. Major like projects for this one include making the dragon chase trait more exciting and also tuning down some of the ceiling comps, Nunu, Zaya, these kinds of things, with reworks to make sure that they're in a healthy state. And from now on, we can just do number tuning from now on.
Remember when I called you the spoiler person last time and you kept like talking about changes before we got to them? You spoiled the whole rundown. Let's just cancel the thing right now.
People knew. People know what needs to get touched.
Are you telling me we're nerfing Zyra?
It's like people know the meta, and so I'm just repeating the things that they already are thinking we need to do. So
Cool. All right, well, let's jump into it. First thing right off the bat here, Astral. We're just changing it very slightly. The gold value isn't changing, so you can expect about the same average gold. But with how easy it was to get units, it just made it a little too easy to like run 3 Astral early and then expect it to upgrade your Skarner and your Vlad and your Nidalee, and you could kind of power through that now. If you want to start getting those units, we've lowered those odds a bit, so you're going to need to 2-star them kind of on their own and then start getting the drops. It's a very minor change, but it is meant to act as a very slight nerf to stage 2 Astral openers.
yeah, if you want to econ with Astral, that's fine. You're just going to take more damage because you won't have a fully upgraded board. But currently, like because you can upgrade your entire board pretty easily, you stay relatively healthy through Krugs, and so we're looking to change that.
Cool. Dragonmancer, pretty decent buff, honestly, to early Dragonmancer. So early Dragonmancer 2 opener should be a bit better. Dragonmancer 4 maybe more of an option. Tiny buff to 6. But I think that's because we're pairing this with, the new changes that Kent already spoiled. And then some nice quality of life changes here, where if you haven't chosen a Dragonmancer hero, there will be big text on your screen reminding you, so that you don't accidentally do fights where you have 6 Dragonmancer and no one's activated. As well as we finally changed the color so that it's different than the Lesser Rune of Allegiance for all you double up players.
Yep, mainly looking to target here. Like the Dragonmancer opener isn't as exciting as it should be, and then in the mid game, you're gonna kind of really struggle to like. I mean, people are really struggling to stabilize right now, unless you're going the Nunu variant. But this is intended to like help that too. Any kind of version you're going, you should be a little bit healthier and be able to scale into late game.
Cool. Scale Scorn, a change that may or may not make a big splash. It'll be interesting to see what happens. But Scale Scorn can now be played with dragons. So I'll be honest, I think anything that kind of restricts comp diversity is not really great for the game. And so we're going to open this up a bit and see if there's, more comps that maybe Olaf and Diana can be run around using some dragons, maybe stuff like some Zippy or Siphon, things like that. Obviously, to pay for that little bit of extra power, we are going to lower their damage reduction ever so slightly, so they won't be quite as tanky. And then 6 Scale Scorn is just overperforming a little much here still, so we're lowering that a tiny bit.
And also to clarify, just like we are doing the damage reduction as a compensation for the Scale Scorn change, but also because it just needs a nerf. Scale Scorn is just really powerful. If you look at data, you see Scale Scorn at the top a lot of the time, and so. The scale scorn thing, we know we're giving like a trade-off with like thematics with scale scorns being able to play with dragons, but we think it comes with a lot of gameplay like positives. There's less rigidity. You're not forced to like only play certain comps with scale scorn. You can think about other comps you want to play. Maybe you want to play guardians, you want to play Idis, and you want to put Draven's axe on Olaf, give him a real axe, and like play that. You have a lot more possibilities now, and that's a big positive change.
Cool. And then finally, Electric Mirage. I think this is one of the least played Mirages, obviously because Deja doesn't work that well with it, and the way it scales is a little confusing. Longer term, there might be, if we have the time, there might be more to do here. I know people have talked about, for example, having Deja proc at the spell. Not doing anything like that right now, but for now, we are going to give it a slight buff. Hopefully this makes it so when you see this, you maybe consider that 3-star Leona angle a little bit more. Consider that and maybe open up some more of those reroll comps we have seen in the past do kind of well. But this should help those a bit and maybe even help them compete with some of those S tier comps.
Yeah, this is a pretty big buff, and with enough Mirage units in, this does a lot of damage. It can really melt through front lines, especially with Nanox Spark, with some sort of shred. So yeah, really encourage players to try this out more. This to make the Leona 3, Nunu 3 variant more exciting.
I'll be honest, my biggest concern with this change isn't actually the like end game comp. I think that'll be fine. I think it's actually the opener. I think an early 2-star Leona, 1-star Yone with this opener is going to be really good.
Yeah, the curve is going to look a lot more like steep, but I think the trade needs it.
Yep, cool. Okay, one of the bigger changes here. So we are changing 5 Dragon. We still want 5 Dragon to not be like an auto include, so it's not meant to be like really, really powerful, but we do want it to be something a little more appealing than just attack speed that you don't need. So we went with health regen. So 5 Dragon now gives you 40 HP a second, which is a pretty sizable chunk. What is it, Kent? It's the equivalent of about like 3 Jade for free, essentially.
Yeah, depending on the type of dragon, but yeah, if you're a frontline dragon, you're getting about 3 Jade.
Cool. But then the new one here is that if you can get 6 dragons, which is hard to do, obviously the best one is getting the Dragon Soul Prismatic, but there are other ways. I know Solus got 7 dragon one time, which still blows my mind. I almost wanted to give him the Dragon Balls for that one. But what happens is your dragons ascend, and you can kind of see it here in this GIF. They'll grow, they'll get all glowy, they get a bunch of power. What that power is, basically it's a bunch of AD, AP, armor, MR, attack speed, and they are powerful. This is meant to be a win condition. This is meant to be a thematic, exciting thing that if you can pull it off, enjoy the Dragon Force, pun intended. And yeah, so Dragon 6, woohoo!
Yeah, I'm not gonna spoil too much, but when combat starts, it gets even more exciting, and then your units are gonna be very, very powerful.
Cool. All right, on the champion side, Gnar. I feel like Gnar has gone through this entire set by like just kind of existing. He's like an okay trait bot. There's some like fun Dragonmancer builds that aren't particularly great, but he just kind of existed. And so giving him some love here to that, hopefully maybe Gnar can actually be something you're excited to hit.
Yeah, Gnar, it's sad. I think Gnar like carry should be very exciting with these changes. He's gonna attack faster, so like some sort of death cap, Runaan's Hurricane, Bloodthirster build. Death cap because he gets AD that scales with AP when he transforms, and so he's going to have a lot of AD at 3-star. With this like massive amounts of armor, he's going to be tanky. He's going to be very strong. So hopefully this should help make him an exciting chase that you can like actually play around, especially if you see some of our like another change later that will pair well with this.
Oh, you didn't spoil it this time. You didn't spoil it this time. Nice.
I had to hold myself back, but I didn't.
Nice.
I didn't spoil it.
All right. And then, as promised, the champion I would have catapulted into the sun. Here are some Zyra nerfs. The attack speed is lowered. This will make it proc Whispers a little less, proc Shojin a little less if you ever go that route, especially the Hurricane route. Because Zyra's an evoker. Generating mana through evoker should be the primary thing you can do, not the auto attacks. So doesn't need a 0.7. Lowering the damage of 1 and 2-star quite a bit. This thing does not need to chunk as hard as it does. Lowering the base almost 25% at 2-star, which is big. So pretty big spell nerf. And then the biggest one here, for those of you that used to play the like Ginsu's Hurricane build of Zyra, there was a bug where Zyra would Zyra will no longer interrupt her cast at high attack speeds. She actually has to pause, finish the cast animation, cast the spell before getting back to auto attacking. So this is a very sizable nerf to the AD Zyra build because now she'll have to stop and cast.
Yeah, so this is intended to hit both the AD version, and like these nerfs are meant to hit the AD version and the mage version, and even just like standard Zyra that's getting splashed in should not be chunking your backline at 2-star with no items for like 500 damage. So this should significantly nerf the like a couple of the top comps, Seraphine, Zyra, mages.
Yep. Yeah, there's a world where honestly, like maybe this isn't enough, but God, I hope it is.
Yeah, these are fairly really big nerfs. Like 100 damage off is a lot.
Massive, yeah.
So we usually don't swing this hard, but this was a unit that really, really needed it.
Yeah, the 4 cost masquerading as a 2 cost.
Yeah, seriously.
Cool. Nunu, you want to talk about Nunu?
Yeah, so Nunu, it's so much fun when the Dragonmancer Nunu eats your Terra 2 with Gargoyle, Gargoyle,
Or
Gargoyle.
your Terra 3?
Or your Terra 3. I don't know if anybody's seen that clip, but there's a Terra 3 that gets eaten one shot by a Nunu with Dragonmancer. I don't even know it's a Nunu 3, just like one
I
shot.
think it was a Nunu 3, but I can't remember.
I hope it was. But yeah, now Nunu will no longer convert his damage to true damage if he has higher HP. He's just going to do 40% more damage instead of 20%. So he should still deal a lot of damage if you give him AP because 40% damage amp is a lot. But at least now you can counter him. If you have Gargoyles, if you have Dragon's Claws, those kinds of things, Mystics, it's all going to make him weaker and he's going to be less likely to just one-shot anything he bites.
Yeah, I think this is
another thing worth noting is that this also means he'll heal less, which means with Bloodthirster and Dragonmancer, he won't be healing to full with every single bite.
Yeah, I think this is a massive, massive nerf to Nunu. So, to be honest, I would be shocked if Dragonmancer Nunu is even still good after this, but we'll see. Because I just think the fact that he can be countered by things like Mystic and a Gargoyle will really get him severe. And when he gets stuck on that front line, that'll be the end of him. So.
Yeah, we really wanted to make this change so that we can like buff up Dragonmancer like we did, so that you have other choices in Dragonmancer rather than always gunning for Dragonmancer Nunu.
Yep. Rakan, this is just a very slight nerf. He'll still cast his first cast just as much, but he doesn't need to repeat cast quite as often, so just going to slow that down by about a second. Just a tiny nerf to Rakan, nothing too crazy.
Yeah, very, very strong unit right now, and so nerfing a cycle should make him feel less oppressive. You're not constantly CC'd.
Yep. Not quite catapulted to the sun, maybe to just Venus, but Seraphine. You want to talk about Seraphine?
Yeah, so Seraphine is currently a menace in the meta. Ton of shielding and also a ton of damage because she synergizes with a couple champions, Graves, Pantheon very well. So we're going to nerf her cycle so that, when she's sitting there in her third row taking damage, she's not going to be casting as often. We're also reducing the shield duration so that, if you CC her or if she doesn't generate enough mana, the shield can actually fall off in time. That's a smaller nerf, but the biggest nerf is to 3-star Seraphine. Right now, if you hit 3-star Seraphine, she's topping your charts and she's topping your shielding charts. We need to make sure that, she is continuing to top your shielding charts because that's what she's supposed to do, but she shouldn't be melting she shouldn't also be melting everything. And so we're giving her a hefty 30% nerf to her spell hit damage at 3-star.
Hot take, Seraphine 3 might still be insane. Although I do think the mana change hits her pretty hard. But typically with Enchanter champions, what we see is like if their shielding gets to a certain point where you can't quite burn through it before they generate mana, they can do a lot, like an Archangel Seraphine 3. That being said, Seraphine 3 should still be good. But hopefully, like I said, this is a big nerf, so hopefully this is enough to make it not quite as easy to get that Seraphine 3 going.
Yeah, I wanted to add that we still want to make sure Seraphine 3 is worth the chase because it is a 3-star 3 cost, but just definitely not as oppressive as she is now.
Yep. And then Zeri, being able to cast a little bit more often, slow the first cast, but otherwise gets to cast more often, and at 1 and 2 star is going to hit even harder. I think at this point, if this Zeri 1 and 2 isn't something you're excited about in the early game, then it may be doomed, but this Zeri is going to be able to pump out a lot of damage now, I think.
Yeah, being able to cycle a little bit faster, having a better breakpoint with Shojin should make her a little bit easier to itemize and maybe a little bit easier to use. If she happens to whiff any casts, she'll more quickly get back into the cycle and be able to cast again and hopefully hit more units this time.
Cool. Continuing on, Hecarim. This isn't really a buff or nerf. It's not colored. Do you want to talk about Hecarim?
Yeah, Hecarim, with Protector's Vow being introduced, giving 30 mana, Hecarim with... We're happy Hecarim has an itemization now. You finally want to put items on Hecarim, but Hecarim is just casting really, really quick into fights. It becomes like insta-CC at the beginning of fights, and so we're reducing the starting mana so that he still will need 2 autos to cast, even if you have Protector's Vow. Other than that, then he's going to need to auto more and just stand there, and the cast will come more delayed. But We still kind of want you to incentivize you to like maybe if you do put some defensive items on him, he can cast multiple times. It's really hard to get him to cast twice now, but like if you actually itemize him, we want him to be able to cast multiple times. Same way like Braum in previous sets was able to do that if you gave him enough defensive items.
Yeah, I'm sad to lose blue buff Hecarim, because now he'll have to auto once to cast. But I think this is definitely a healthy change. And again, like you said, the instantaneous Hecarim ult into close to instantaneous Shyvana ult into Bard ult into Jace ult was just
Yay.
never something I want to experience again. Speaking of which, why don't you talk about the next change?
Yeah, so Jace, part of the goals of this patch was to reduce the amount of CC in that Xayah comp by nerfing the things around Xayah, even though Xayah is not exactly the problem. There's just so much CC packed in that comp. So with Jace and Shyvana both being high cost shapeshifters and both giving a lot of CC at the beginning of combat, we wanted to remove that from Jace and give him kind of like a lean more into this like drain tank carry identity. So we took away some armor and MR so that if he starts on the back line, he's a ranged unit, he's more squishy. But once he transforms, he gains 45 armor and MR instead of the knockup. And so now he's like tankier, can cycle more often. And so now if you have like AP items on him, he'll deal a lot of damage, he'll continue to heal, and he'll be a little bit bulkier so that he can survive the damage and continue doing that cycle. Another form of compensation is we're giving him a pretty large buff to his initial spell cast. And so that first cast is going to hurt a little bit more. It just won't CC the units.
Yeah, I'm hoping we see some more itemized Jaces. That being said, Jace was already in a good spot, and I think, honestly, this doesn't change that much, other than he just doesn't get that first CC, which, means he won't be literally thrown into every comp in the end game.
Yep. And with lower armor and MR in the beginning of fights, you're less incentivized to stick him up there in the front to get that like first cast off almost instantaneously after Hecarim ults.
Cool. And then Neela, basically, it looks like we're basically fixing bugs with Neela. You want to talk about this a bit?
Yeah, Neela has had this weird situation. Like she's really powerful, but her shields currently don't stack. So when she steals a shield, if she has a shield, she doesn't steal another one, and so it's not what we intended. And so now Neela can stack up and steal a lot of shields. But if those shields lasted forever, she does have infinite shielding, and so we're giving her a duration on the shield, so it falls off after 4 seconds. But if she happens to steal like big shields, she'll be invulnerable for a little bit of time while she's taking shield damage.
Cool.
This is meant to be power neutral, so we want to fix the bug and we want to compensate nerf to keep her at the same power level as she is now.
Cool. All right, some dragon buffs. Xiaoyu, just making Xiaoyu just a tiny bit better. Again, we talked about this in the patch post-mortem, but we can't really buff Xiaoyu too much. Hopefully we can buff Jade in other ways, things like the Gnar change, stuff like that, and you'll see some other changes later. Now I'm the spoiler. But we just want to give Xiaoyu 2 just a little bit of a nudge here so that Xiaoyu can kind of stand up to some of the other dragons.
Yeah, in the past post-mortem we talked about the curve of Jade where, early game Jade has it's very tempo comp, but really starts to fall off too hard. And so by giving Xiaoyu some more power, Xiaoyu should be able to stand up to the late game and give you some time to build an even stronger comp around her before everyone like scales up to level 9 and all that stuff, and you're stuck there falling off.
Yep. Speaking of which, with Zyra now in the sun, burning and melting, we can buff Siphon. So Siphon gets a little bit of a buff where his spell, the Bite, will go through armor a little bit more, so it'll hit a little harder. And then letting him cast just a little bit more often here. Trying to be very light with Siphon. We know Siphon can be a frustrating champion when he's very good, but he definitely does need a little bit of a buff here.
Yeah, the right now, like you see a Siphon charging at your backline, and like sometimes he'll one shot you, and sometimes you're just like, it's fine, whatever, I'm not too scared. So we're making sure this armor pen is even higher, just so that like when he does charge, this is gonna do more damage. It scales with AP, and so like most likely he'll be one shotting most things, but not to the level of the previous set. And then yeah, the mana change makes it so that he's charging a little bit more often.
Yep. And then finally, Tyrant Swain. Again, definitely one of the champions that's been pretty hard to play. We want to be really careful making him more tanky right now. It hasn't been a tank-friendly meta, but maybe as that shifts, Swain might become good. But instead, we are going to buff his damage just a bit, quite a bit actually. It's a pretty sizable chunk of damage. He's not going to be like an AP carry or anything like that, but it should actually allow him to do some decent damage across the board and maybe make him just a bit more of a threat now.
Yes. We're seeing like Swain struggle a lot against this meta where like the front line just really blows up, or like people just skip the front line, and so like Swain gets left alone. He's this really tanky unit at the end of the fight. He has like 6 people, 7 people on him, and he just can't kill anything. So giving him some more of the spell damage will help in those situations, but will also help with like he can slowly like chunk down other people. And when there's fewer units left, he's going to be dealing a lot more damage. And so there should be some builds out there where Darkflight Swain with maybe Darkflight Essence will be really powerful.
Nice. All right, items. Gargoyle Stoneplate. This was a change we meant to ship last patch. We're shipping it this patch. Sweet.
Yep.
You want to talk about Protector's Vow?
Ooh, okay. This item, everyone's favorite item. Protector's Vow is really powerful right now in the meta. We sifted through a lot of data and saw that like not only is the item good, a lot of the augments that grant the item are also just better than their counterparts that don't grant the item. And it's like, well, this item is overperforming. The shield is just granting like a lot of value. I mean, we want the item to be good in granting your team armor and MR. Like that's kind of the point of the item. But the shield is there to like block off some damage as it procs as a really short shield, but right now with like when you have a big clump, for example like the Seraphine clump, you're all clumped in the center, it hits everyone and everyone just blocking a bunch of AoE damage, especially with some of the units that have like 4 cost 2 stars have a decent amount of health, and so they're like invulnerable for a little bit of time for those 2 seconds. We're taking that away so that you can actually break through that. The shield is less valuable now, and it's a pretty sizable nerf to the shield.
Yep. Longer term, I want us to take another look at this item. Obviously this was a Frozen Heart replacement and it came out pretty quick. But right now, I will say it feels like it has 3 purposes, and it's very muddy. It's like the starting mana is really good. We see that on things like Hecarim. Now it's a very tiny shield, and then it also grants a very tiny amount of armor and MR. And so 3 very tiny outputs leads to a not very sharp item. So I think there's a world where we're going to have to consider like cutting one of those outputs. That way we can buff out the other outputs. Because right now it's just like 3 tiny things that barely matter now.
Yeah, I think the starting mana is like one of the things we did consider, but then it is interesting that there's a consideration for like a mana item for your tanks or for your you consider the who to put the item on, rather than just like, oh, I'm gonna stick it on a random unit and have it die. It's like I kind of want to care about this unit who I want to cast.
Yeah.
So something to think about though for sure for the long term.
And then finally, Rocket Propelled Fist. I'm just going to shortcut this and just say, look, anytime we have a set where there's a corner threat, whether it be a Blitzcrank or a Thresh or an Aatrox, this item's going to need like 700 HP because everyone's going to be positioning around that Blitzcrank and Thresh, and this item will be garbage. But whenever there's a set where there isn't and everyone's using the corner, this item is amazing. This item, I think, could have 0 HP in this set, and it is very, very good, especially like in non-tournaments, right, where people aren't like scouting like crazy. Like you do so much player damage when people aren't expecting this, and then they forget you're in the lobby, and like this item is amazing. And so I'm just going to shortcut it, and like I said, if this item exists in a set with grab, give it like 800 HP. If it doesn't, cut the HP. And so we're nerfing it again because it's still overperforming because it's a set without a grab.
Yeah, the item granted a lot of stats because the grab wasn't that powerful, but now it's like it's going to grant a normal amount of stats, and the grab is very powerful. And it's funny because we looked at the data and we're like, no, this must be like, Master Plus players will never fall. They like get pulled once and they learn and they never lose to this again.
No.
The round win rate will dip at the mid game, and then nope, GM Plus, people are still like losing to this item all the time, and it's like, okay, people aren't paying attention, I guess. Yep. And so it's not really a skill level thing; it's just the item's too strong.
Well, I mean, it's an effort thing. It takes a lot of effort to play around this item.
Yes, you have to move into the corner, then move away from the corner when you're going to face this person, and then go back, and it's a lot of effort.
Yep. Cool. Augments. I'll just power through this list, and then you can cover anything you want to talk about.
For sure. Yeah.
Base Camp, definitely one of those things that's taking scale scoring from A tier to S plus tier, getting a nerf, going down a percent. Battle Mage 1, 2, 3, we're really happy with the new version that has armor and MR. But the AP is just a little low. The augment's underperforming a tiny bit, so +5 at every level. Better Together was granting a Protector's Vow. The augment is already really good. We see it with Zeke's builds, but it really doesn't need the best item it can get. So we're going to switch it back to Locket of the Iron Solari. This is kind of a nerf to how it's played now, but I actually am not marking it as a nerf because I think there are ways this could actually be considered a buff, especially in the early game. Birthday Present is underperforming a bit, so we're putting 1 gold back on each level up. We have to be really careful here because I think any more than that, it might just become oppressively good. But we like the augment. It's a very fun augment, so just want to try to get that up to, as good as all the other prismatics. Celestial Blessing is supposed to be more about the healing and less about the giant shield, especially at like Celestial Blessing 2. Getting a 450 shield on your Xayah is a lot of power, and so we're bringing that down, especially at the higher levels. Celestial Blessing 1, not nerfed nearly as much. Future Sight, literally the least picked augment in the game for a variety of reasons, but even for when it's picked, it's just not that good. So we're lowering it down to tier 1. So getting a tier 1 where you get a Zephyr and know your opponent should hopefully be pretty appealing. That should make it pretty good. Speaking of which, Pandora's Bench. We're lowering the gold back to 2 because we're going to tier silver. With so many more dragons, it's basically not near as good as it was last set. I think it baits a lot of new players. We're like, yeah, I'm going to take this and reroll Kaisa, and they just never hit. So hopefully this should make it okay at tier 1. Sunfire Board is meant to be the premier anti-healing augment. If you don't have a Sunfire Morello, you can take Sunfire Board. The problem was it was only lasting half the fight, so we're making that last a little longer. Speaking of which, the other premier anti-healing augment, Weak Spot, we've actually removed. We want to kind of give that a more sharp identity and not have it overlap with Sunfire Board, so for now that's gone. Tiamat, I always mispronounce that. Tiamat is now going to be buffed a bit, try to help warriors out a little bit with that augment that right now they just don't really seem to want it. And then finally, probably the most controversial augment change here is Earth's Grab Bag 1 is being removed. Right now, it's just granting a little bit too much accessibility to some of the spatula buildable things that we want in the game. Things like Dragonmancer, Shimmer Scale, stuff like that. We'd rather the spatulas be a lot rarer, and this has been one of the bigger things that has inflated the number of spatulas in the game. So for now, we're going to take this away and sort of reevaluate its place.
Yep. A couple I want to touch on. I think let's see. One big one is Celestial Blessing. This augment is performing really well, especially at the higher tiers. But it's meant to be kind of like a generic out. We want you to want it for the Omnivamp. It's like now you can play around having the Omnivamp. The Overheal Shield is like there and it's nice. And sometimes you can do some pretty cool combos with it, with like, First Aid Kit or whatever. And you're like, now you have these big Overheal Shields. But the Overheal Shields are like massive. And that's actually like a large part of the power where like, if you go frontline to backline, then you run into the Xayah or like the Zyra and the Sohm and whatever, and they just have a 600 health shield. You're like, my God, how did I burn through that? So we're bringing that down. Let's see. Weak Spot. This is an augment that like we started to remove the armor pen, but if we eventually like removed all armor pen and it just said like your auto attacks, give anti-heal to the enemy team, it becomes not a very interesting augment. It's just like, oh, I guess I'll take it, and now I don't have to think about anti-heal anymore. It shouldn't be like that for an augment. It's not a very good augment. And so if it was the other way around where it's like it gives armor pen, it's like, well, if you're playing certain comps, then you're just going to go for this armor pen and there's not much to think about. And so it was in a weak spot, and so we're going to take it out, and maybe we'll reintroduce it in the future at some point with a pretty heavy rework. And then, Earth's Grab Bag, as Mort mentioned, just like spatula. Earth's Grab Bag is like really common and also really highly picked. And so we want to keep spatulas very rare. And the last one, Battle Mage. It's been pretty tough to play Battle Mage because your mages are typically pretty squishy. When you go up there, you have armor, but it's not really worth it a lot of times because of how like the AP just isn't enough to actually incentivize you to all clump up there to get hit by Sohms and to get hit by, Zyra is really popular in this meta, and Xayah. And so this is more just like, well, now you can fight back. You're a lot stronger, and so you can deal more damage and kind of turn the fight around before you're just inevitably blown up because your positioning is not as good.
Cool.
All
right,
that's it.
Keep going. All right, on the small side, Jade, as we mentioned, just a little bit of a buff here. We have to be really careful because again, Jade does really well in stage, 3 and early 4. But we're just trying to help it maybe get to its end game state a little bit more. Maybe find that Soraka, maybe build around a dragon or be able to pivot. So just a little bit of attack speed at 5 and 7 to just make it a little bit more appealing. And remember, this is paired with the Gnar buff and the Shiou buff, so hopefully this gets Jade to a better spot. Mage, we're nerfing 5 and 7, just 5% each, so it's very light, but this paired with the Zyra nerf should be enough to kind of get Mage at a healthy spot. Ragewing, we're hitting Ragewing 6 again. Ragewing 6 is just, it's such a good core. You have Xayah the carry, Shyvana, Rakan, and Hecarim all giving CC and a lot of power. The core is just really good. It doesn't need to be that good. So lowering its Omnivamp just a little bit here. And then finally, Swift Shot 5 is a chase trait that doesn't really feel worth chasing. So buffing that up 5%. Remember, that's 5% per hex. So that can actually be quite a bit of attack speed. And so hopefully these help a little bit.
Yep. And before everyone goes, oh, you're buffing Jade, Shiou, and Gnar, this Jade's gonna be broken. But we're only buffing the attack speed part of Jade, not the health regen, which is a significant part of the trait. And we're not going that hard on these buffs. And then Shiou is only buffed at 2 stars, and Gnar is you have to dedicate yourself to play Gnar to like really make use of those Gnar buffs. Other than like early game, that'll for sure help.
I feel like we're gonna have the opposite problem where actually like there's 3 Jade buffs, but it might not be enough to make Jade as like easy to play, and so I'm more skeptical it'll be the other way. We're just like, that's it, Jade needed more.
Part of the hope is that like by bringing down these top, especially Xayah, who makes it so that like Shiou can't move, will help Shiou shine a little bit in the late game.
Yep. Cool. Continuing on, you want to talk about Lee Sin? Actually, why don't you handle this page?
Yeah, sure. So Lee Sin currently has a bug where if he lands right in front of a unit, or his kicked target lands right in front of a unit, it won't deal damage to that unit that it's in front of. This means that sometimes when you kick a unit into Xayah takes no damage. But if it lands next to Xayah will take damage. So it's kind of specific, but it is a pretty big buff because I don't think it happens a decent amount of times. And so because we're making that change, we're also buffing Dragonmancer 6. And so we're nerfing Lee Sin's spell damage just by a little bit, just tune him back and make sure that, because sometimes he doesn't hit the backline at all. Now he will. We don't want him to like constantly just be one-shotting everything. Volibear, we talked about this in the patch rundown, but early game Shimmer Scale needs some help. Volibear is just a very weak, hard to play unit right now. And so we want to make sure there's multiple ways to play Dragonmancer. There's just so many different variants to Dragonmancer, and it should be a lot of fun. So we're giving Volibear a small buff, but it should nudge him in the right direction. And then Zippy. Zippy is... we think Zippy's in a pretty good spot actually for a 2-star. If you give him like enough items, he is really good in the mid game. And with specific builds where you multiply his spell, he can deal a lot of damage. Even at 3-star, he can deal like a ton of damage, but he's just a little bit hard to like. He's like inconsistent. That's just kind of who Zippy is. Zippy is kind of like a small dumb dragon, very cute, but isn't good at killing things. And so we're making sure that like that will really hurt if you have the right build.
Yep, nothing to add. Cool. I guess actually one thing to add is I don't think this is going to move the needle enough on Volibear. That's the one I think when I look at this, I'm like, we probably need to do a little bit more. But again, it's better to go light and not overreact. So
yeah. Plus we've buffed Dragonmancer 2 and 4 in the early game as well. So
cool. Xayah 1 is just doing a little bit too much damage for a 1-star. I think Xayah 2 is like, we want Xayah where she is, and obviously we hit things like the Jace, but Xayah 1 just gets a little bit of a nudge down so that you actually need to upgrade your Xayah. I don't need to hear Soju say Xayah 1, Xayah 2, no diff or something like that, so make it a little bit more of a diff there. Aoshen 2, kind of the premier dragon right now, a little bit too good compared to, say, Aurelion Sol, stuff like that. I got the colors wrong on Aurelion Sol, oops. But so just a light nerf to Aoshen 2, so he's not quite the ultimate premier. Also as a silly thing, and I know this, I'm going to get memed for this, but, there was the game where I lost with Aoshen 3, so clearly I had Kent go fix this. That's not how it happened at all. But Aoshen 3 now basically will cast 100 lightning bolts in addition to hitting every unit. So basically, it's like if you can get Aoshen 3 to start casting, he'll never stop until everything's dead. And so that should be a little bit of a buff. And then Aurelion Soul to try to get on the same level as something like Aoshen gets a buff at both 1 and 2 star. That's a buff. I know it's red. Leave me alone.
Xayah, no more like fast 9 off Xayah 1. I mean, you probably still can if you have an amazing board and you hit everything else, you have the augments and everything, maybe. But should be a lot less easy to do that now by like, we're nerfing our supporting cast, we're nerfing Xayah 1. We really want you to like have to stabilize on Xayah 2. She's just dealing a little bit too much damage as a 1-star unit, just wiping things, wiping front lines. Aurelion Soul, this is relatively small. We don't want to go too hard. We don't want to get to a point where like ASOL is just, blowing up. You built a nice backline and ASOL just kind of blows it up. But we do think ASOL needs a little bit more damage. He's just not that desirable of a dragon right now. And so just giving him a little nudge.
Cool. On the Augment side, Binary Airdrop gets its AI improved with Shyvana, Jason, Jax a little bit. Just a nice small quality of life thing. Dragonmancer Conference will now only appear on 2-1. That's really all the time you want it. And Scoped Weapons 1 gets a little bit of a buff, 5 attack speed. Nothing too crazy.
Yep, we're not buffing Scoped Weapons 2 because the infinite attack range is already really, really good and a huge jump from Scoped Weapons 1. So just the attack speed on Scoped Weapons 1.
Cool. And then the bug fix page. The most important one is Kai'Sa's name has been fixed from Kai'Sa in all instances. S is supposed to be capitalized. Oops. We're bad at lore, apparently. Hecarim's Rage Bar now properly displays in increments of 15. It's just a visual change. Astral now properly grants AP in Ghost Armies. Jade now properly grants attack speed and healing in Ghost Armies. Soul Siphon now properly grants the topmost trait of the sacrifice unit. This is probably, honestly, one of the bigger changes of the patch because the augment now works. I think this is one of the lowest performing augments ever because it basically said, I don't want an augment and I'm going to bait myself into bad choices.
Yeah.
Nunu will no longer attempt to swallow units that are invulnerable. Nunu will no longer occasionally fail to cast his abilities if he has an RFC. Cannoneer's cannon shots will now benefit from Celestial Blessing's Omnivamp. Rakan will now no longer taunt units for long periods of time, causing some melee units to follow him. This is a pretty big nerf to Rakan as well, a good one, but it is a bit of a nerf. Xayah's feathers now properly recall if she's stealthed by Edge of Night. I know this was an annoying bug and should actually open up some more Xayah itemization, which is good. The Sunken Treasure mission now progresses properly. A later mission will be added to compensate for that. I know a lot of people were really bothered by that mission not finishing. And then finally, Age of Dragons tooltip has been shortened to now fit better on mobile screens. So a couple bug fixes.
Yeah, a lot. Shout out to all like a bunch of designers, engineers helping up with fixing out these ghosts, and QA for identifying all these ghost army bugs. As you'll probably notice, you might start losing to ghost armies more often. Now they're starting to get into like regular power levels because a lot of things are starting to work. So yeah, the team did a great job in like coming together and like identifying all these problems and fixing it. And I think we have like a good way to start figuring them out in the future earlier on now as well. And then cannon shots, because they replace their attack, and it's basically their attack, but kind of in an AoE, it should benefit from Celestial Blessing. It should no longer be a grief to take Celestial Blessing with Cannoneer, and I think that wasn't clear to a lot of players, and so this bug fix should be good for Cannoneer who also kind of just needs this buff, especially at upper Cannoneer levels, well 4.
Cool.
But yeah, that's it.
Yep. So, yeah, like I said, this is probably the last major adjustments, things like the Dragon 6, the Jace rework, and stuff like that. From here on out, it's going to be light balance changes, trying to get it ready for, the big competitive stuff here at the end of the set. And then just also some of our resources are probably shifting on to things like the next set. I know, Kent, you're going to be helping more with the thing, and so, yeah.
The thing.
Yeah.
That's not to say that we're not going to continue to do, heavy balancing and things like that. We won't be changing like mechanics. So like we won't be adding a Dragon 7 or something like that. Maybe. I don't know.
Guild 9 when? Guild 9 when?
Yeah. So, but yeah, basically no new mechanics that you have to like learn. This is the game now. We will continue keeping us high, like lots of scrutiny on balance, making sure that things continue to stay fun for everyone.
Jade 11 when?
Jade 11 when?
Yep. It is always fun.
Prodigy 5 when?
I do actually really like when people send me the screenshots of like when they just like break the things. Like someone sent me an 8 scale scorn screenshot the other day, and I'm just like, amazing, congrats. You know?
That's 4
Yes,
spatulas.
I know. Yeah,
And they're
they had
uncraftable.
so they had a scale scorn heart, and then the 2 tome of trait prismatic, and then they got one off
Wow.
the carousel later apparently. So it was just like, but like stuff like that is so good. I love it when people send me stuff, or Solus's 7 dragons. Like
Yep.
it's so fun
Solus
to
is
see.
7 dragon.
So
When you guys hit the 6 dragon thing, if you guys hit it, figure it out, and like, I'm excited to see some reactions.
yeah, should be fun. Cool. All right. Well, that's gonna do it for us. Hopefully, this leads to another better patch. Hopefully the less frustration around Zaya and Seraphine and stuff like that. But fingers crossed. So, yeah.
Yep.
All right. That's gonna do it from us. Until next time, take it easy.
See ya.